the neuron. So this is the functional unit of the nervous system. So this is the structure that passes information in the form of an impulse. So passes information or communication by way of an electrical impulse. So the neuron is the workhorse of the nervous system. And when we looked at the neuron in the tissue chapter, if you remember, the neuron is just a cell. It's a cell, it's got a cell body, it's got all of that stuff, just like any other cell, but it just looks weird. So it has a cell body, has a nucleus in it, and then if you remember, it has those weird projections off of it, extensions. Okay, so there were ones that came off of the cell body that looked kind of like this. And they look like dead tree branches. This isn't the greatest picture in the whole wide world, but I'll have to do. And these things were called dendrites. Dendrites receive information. So they receive impulses. Impulses come in this direction and they go towards the cell body. If the impulse ends up on a dendrite, it's still going to go towards the cell body. Okay? We know there's dendrites, and there's a bunch of them. In the neuron the type of neuron that we're looking at, there's a ton of them. Okay? So there can be a ton, there can be one, but there will only be one axon. So the axon comes off here, down, and it will branch into little terminals. Draw that out there. So this is the axon, and it conveys impulses or sends them. And again, the axon will, at the bottom of it, it will split up into axon terminals. The axon is generally covered with, or generally has a covering, usually all the way down it, and it's a covering of a fatty substance called myelin. And this whole thing all the way down is a myelin sheath. And that fatty substance kind of insulates it. It's kind of like the covering that's on your wires, on something that you plug in. Okay. In the axon terminals. So in these things here, those things are going to be full of neurotransmitter. And when an impulse is sent, that neurotransmitter will be released to go over to the effector. So this is the effector here. Okay, so that neurotransmitter will go over to the effector to do its thing. And the place where that axon terminal meets the effector that it is innervating, it doesn't touch. It's just like the neuromuscular junction. Those axon terminals don't touch. So there will be a space there called the cleft. And that neurotransmitter has to diffuse across that cleft to the effector. To send its thing. And the effector could be anything. It could be, you know, muscle or a gland or whatever. It could also be another neuron. And we'll see how neurons pass information or impulses from neuron to neuron. So that is what the neuron looks. That's the anatomy of the neuron. And again, the information is traveling in this direction, right? Information comes in that side and comes out down here, or is conveyed down there. Okay, I think that's about all we need to know at the moment. There are some extra things in here, just so you know. The neuron is a very metabolic structure. It makes a lot of proteins, so it has a very complex endoplasmic reticulum type structure. It has an area here, and I just want to point this out really quickly because we will be looking at this. This little area here, where the axon starts. This has a special name. It's called the Axon Hillock. And when we bring in an action potential, so if we bring in an action potential, it comes in, we receive it up here on the dendrites or the cell in the cell body, and then it is funneled down to the Axon Hillock. And if it gets down there and is strong enough, it will cause the Axon Hillock to have an action potential. So we'll go over that more later, but I just wanted to mention that particular structure because that's going to be important. Don't forget that an action potential that comes down the axon goes to all of its terminals. Okay, it doesn't stop at one or go to two or whatever. It goes to all of them. Okay, so next we'll talk about the structural organization of the nervous system.